The Galactic Summit's crystal dome amplified General Krazoth's voice as he crushed a model of Earth's defense satellite in his chitinous claw. Blood-red light glinted off his battle scars, each representing a species that had fallen to the Vexari Empire. "Observe how the humans hide," he roared, mandibles clicking with contempt as holographic displays showed Earth's elaborate orbital defense network. 3 times we've offered honorable combat on neutral ground. 3 times they've refused, cowering behind their automated killing machines like hatchlings. The 17 subjugated species ambassadors shifted uncomfortably. Many secretly admired humanity's resistance, but none dared show it. Krazoth impaled a human figurine on his ceremonial blade. They develop impressive weapons, yet lack the warrior's heart to face death. Their commanders sacrifice machines instead of earning glory through blood and pain. Is this courage? His warriors stomped rhythmically, rattling the chamber's foundations. Technological parasites, innovation thieves, cowards. The transmission cut to static on Earth's military command screens. Admiral Helena Reyes didn't flinch as murmurs filled the Pentagon's crisis room. Her weathered face remained impassive while younger officers called for mobilization. "Silence," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Everyone froze. She placed a single personnel file on the conference table. The holographic image showed a soldier with eyes that seemed to look through the camera rather than at it. "That arrogant bug wants a show of force." Reyes smiled thinly. "Let's give him exactly what he doesn't expect. We send 1 soldier." "1," General Thompson sputtered. "They have a fleet off." "Just 1." Reyes tapped the file. "And Krazoth will never forget her name." Outside the Pentagon, spring thunderstorms lashed Washington, D.C. with sheets of rain that seemed to mirror the tension building within the command center. Junior officers exchanged nervous glances as the room's AI projected casualty estimates from potential Vexari attacks against human colonies. "Permission to speak freely, Admiral?" asked Colonel Rivera, the youngest of the Joint Chiefs. Reyes nodded once. The Vexari wiped out the Centauri Confederation with minimal losses. 3 billion lives extinguished in 8 days. Rivera's voice trembled slightly. Their battle doctrine revolves around overwhelming force. They'll interpret sending a single soldier as the ultimate insult. "Good," Reyes replied, studying the personnel file. "Because it is." She enlarged the hologram, revealing the full service record of Staff Sergeant Maya Chen. Combat decorations scrolled endlessly alongside notations classified at the highest levels. 14 years ago, the Vexari slave ship raided New Mumbai colony, Reyes explained. They took 37 humans. 1 escaped and brought 23 survivors home. "I remember the incident," General Williams said. "A teenager hijacked the ship somehow." "But what does that?" Reyes expanded another section of the file. That teenager was Maya Chen. She didn't just escape. She infiltrated their command systems, disabled their weapons, and locked 17 Vexari warriors in their own brig before piloting the vessel back to human space. The room fell silent. "The Vexari respect strength above all," Reyes continued, "but they fundamentally misunderstand human strength. They measure power in fleet size, warrior counts, and planetary bombardments." She closed the file with a decisive gesture. "It's time they learned that humans don't need numbers to be dangerous." Outside, lightning split the sky above the National Mall, illuminating monuments to ancient human conflicts where smaller, more adaptive forces had repeatedly triumphed over larger, more rigid opponents. "Contact Staff Sergeant Chen," Reyes ordered. "Tell her to pack light. She's about to make history." Staff Sergeant Maya Chen was blindfolded in the middle of a live-fire exercise when the extraction team arrived. 3 Vexari combat drones, captured technology reprogrammed for training, lay disabled around her. Their internal systems had been surgically compromised by her custom-designed viruses. "Sorry to interrupt your fun, Sergeant," the extraction leader shouted over the sirens. "Command needs you. Now." 6 hours later, Chen stood at perfect attention before the Joint Chiefs, still in her mud-spattered combat gear. The room smelled of coffee and tension. "Your file says you escaped a Vexari slave ship at 14, Admiral Ray said, studying Chen's impassive face. "Hijacked their vessel. Brought home 23 human prisoners. I got lucky, Mom. Your psych profile says you haven't experienced fear since that day." Chen's dark eyes revealed nothing. "A neurological adaptation, ma'am, not courage." Rice circled her. "The Vexari believe strength comes through overwhelming numbers. They'd call humanity cowards for preserving lives rather than glorifying death." "Permission to speak freely, ma'am." "Granted. They're tactically primitive despite their technological advantages. They've never faced an apex predator species before encountering us." Rice smiled. "Which is precisely why we're sending you, alone, into their flagship." The color drained from the other officers' faces, but Chen merely nodded. "They expect an army," Rice continued. "Instead, they'll get one human, one who already beat their system as a child. And my mission parameters." Rice's eyes hardened. "Teach them why humans don't need numbers to be feared." The briefing room transformed into a secure preparation chamber as holographic projectors activated around Chen. Three-dimensional schematics of the Vexari flagship materialized, rotating to reveal access points, defense systems, and command hierarchies. "The Hive dominance carries 50,000 warriors and 16 planetary bombardment arrays," explained Colonel Wei, head of Sinological Intelligence. "It's their most prestigious vessel, and General Krazoth never leaves it." Chen studied the ship's layout, her eyes tracking potential entry points and security vulnerabilities. Their computational architecture still relies on quantum-stabilized biotech. "Yes, but they've upgraded since your previous encounter," Wei replied, unable to hide his admiration. "Their subsystems now employ recursive authentication protocols we haven't fully decoded." Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Doesn't matter. Quantization always creates predictable patterns at the biological interface level." The gathered officers exchanged glances. Few humans could discuss Vexari technology with such intimate knowledge. "You'll travel under diplomatic protocols," Rice continued. "Their warrior culture prevents them from refusing a formal envoy, even from an enemy." "They'll scan for weapons," Chen observed. "Which is why you won't carry any," Rice confirmed. "Nothing that their sensors would recognize as a threat anyway." A technician approached with a small case. Inside rested an unassuming metal sphere and what appeared to be standard-issue diplomatic credentials. "The credentials contain nanocircuitry that will map their systems when you present them," Wei explained. "The sphere is something new. Our engineers reverse-engineered it from Vexari communication technology. Once activated, it can access their ship's environmental controls." Chen studied the objects. "And if they decide to just kill me anyway?" "The Vexari never execute diplomatic envoys," Rice replied. "It would invalidate their claims of honor superiority. They're arrogant, not stupid." Chen's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "So my mission is to walk into their most powerful warship, alone and essentially unarmed. And what? Scare them. Educate them," Rice corrected. "Make them understand that humanity's restraint isn't weakness. It's evolutionary strategy." "And if education fails?" Admiral Rice's expression grew solemn. "Then make sure they regret underestimating us." The room fell silent as Chen picked up the metal sphere, testing its weight in her palm. "When do I leave?" "Immediately. A diplomatic shuttle is prepped and waiting." Rice extended her hand, a gesture rarely offered to subordinates. "The fate of Earth's colonies may depend on what happens in that ship, Sergeant." Chen's handshake was firm. "I won't let you down, ma'am." "I know," Rice replied. "That's why it's just you. One soldier is all we need to send." As Chen turned to leave, General Thompson asked the question everyone was thinking. "Aren't you afraid, Sergeant?" Chen paused at the doorway, her silhouette framed against the bright light beyond. "No, sir. but the Vexari will be. The Vexari flagship Hive Dominance loomed against the starfield like a nightmare. 12 kilometers of biomechanical horror with weapon systems that could glass a continent. Chen's diplomatic shuttle approached, impossibly small against the behemoth. "Attention, human vessel." The Vexari controller's voice crackled with anticipation. "Transmit manifest of warriors." "Transmitting now," Chen replied calmly. A pause. Then explosive chittering, the Vexari equivalent of laughter. "Your manifest claims 1 soldier. Verify." "Verified," Chen confirmed. "Earth sends 1 representative." The docking bay that swallowed her shuttle was designed to process invasion forces, a cavernous space now filled with thousands of Vexari warriors in ceremonial battle armor. They formed precise geometric formations, mandibles clicking in a synchronized war cadence that vibrated through Chen's bones. When her shuttle door opened, the sound stopped abruptly. Chen stepped out alone. 5'8" of humanity in a simple black uniform. No visible weapons. The silence became absolute. General Krazoth broke through the formation, his massive armored form towering 12 feet above her. Bioluminescent patterns flashed across his exoskeleton, a display of dominance. This is humanity's response. His translator couldn't fully convey his contempt. 1 female. No battle armor. No honor guard. No weapons. Chen looked up at him, unblinking. "You wanted to see human courage. Here I am." The assembled warriors erupted in chittering mockery. Some banged their blade arms against their thorax plates. Chen waited for the noise to subside. "I understand your confusion, General. You expected an army because that's how the Vexari think." She reached slowly into her pocket. Instantly, thousands of weapons locked onto her. Chen smiled slightly as she withdrew a small holographic projector. "But there's something you should understand about humans," she continued, voice carrying effortlessly through the vast chamber. "We don't need numbers to be dangerous. Earth sent 1 soldier." She activated the device, projecting a 3-dimensional tactical display of the very room they stood in, with 1 human heat signature surrounded by thousands of Vexari. "Because that's all we needed to send." The display shifted, highlighting key command nodes throughout the assembled forces. Security vulnerabilities appeared as pulsing red indicators across the Vexari formation. "Impossible," hissed the Vexari's security commander, mandibles flaring. "This chamber is shielded against all scanning technologies." Chen tilted her head. "Apparently not all of them." The projector's light cast strange shadows across her face as she took a deliberate step toward Krazoth. None of the warriors moved to stop her, too shocked by this display of technological superiority. "When I presented my credentials, your systems scanned them," Chen explained, now close enough to the general that she had to crane her neck to meet his compound eyes. "Standard protocol. But while you were scanning me, I was scanning you." Krazoth's exoskeleton pulsed with bands of warning coloration. "What is the purpose of this demonstration?" "Education," Chen replied simply. "The first lesson is already complete." "And what lesson is that, human?" Krazoth's voice had dropped to a dangerous rumble. "That your most heavily protected command center was compromised in less than 30 seconds by 1 unarmed human." Chen's voice remained conversational, as if discussing the weather. "Imagine what an actual invasion force could do." A ripple of unease passed through the assembled warriors. For a species that valued overwhelming force, the implications were disturbing. Krazoth's massive claw snapped closed inches from Chen's face, a dominance display meant to trigger a fear response. She didn't flinch. "Your insolence exceeds even human reputation," he growled. "What prevents me from crushing you where you stand?" "3 things," Chen replied calmly. "First, I'm here under diplomatic protocol, which your culture honors regardless of personal feelings. Second, killing me would only prove to humanity that the Vexari cannot be reasoned with, triggering the very conflict you claim to desire. And third, Krazoth demanded. Chen smiled. Third, you're genuinely curious what one human could possibly show the mighty Vexari Empire. The general's compound eyes studied her intently before he stepped back, making a gesture that caused his warriors to lower their weapons. Take her to the war chamber, he ordered. If humans believe one soldier can represent their species, let us hear this. Education. As the escort formation surrounded her, Chen caught something unexpected in Krazoth's posture. A subtle shift that her xenobiology training identified as the Vexari equivalent of intrigue. The first seed had been planted. The war chamber of the Hive Dominance resembled a cathedral to violence. Trophies from conquered worlds lined the walls. Artifacts suspended in stasis fields, each telling the story of a civilization that had fallen to the Vexari. The vaulted ceiling displayed a real-time galactic map where Vexari-controlled systems glowed crimson against the darkness. Chen was positioned at the center of a circular platform, surrounded by the Empire's highest-ranking commanders. Their exoskeletons bore elaborate markings denoting battles won and species subjugated. Hovering drones recorded the proceedings for transmission throughout Vexari space. Your display in the docking bay was unexpected, Krazoth acknowledged, taking his position on an elevated command platform. Now explain why humans cower behind machines rather than face honorable combat. Chen activated her holographic projector again. This time, it displayed Earth's evolutionary timeline, beginning with early primates. To understand human warfare, she began, you must first understand human evolution. The hologram showed early humans hunting megafauna with primitive spears, working in coordinated groups to take down creatures many times their size. Unlike the Vexari, we didn't evolve natural weapons. No claws. No armor. Chen gestured to herself. This body seems fragile compared to yours, so we developed something else. The display shifted to show a human brain, with certain regions highlighted. Problem solving. Pattern recognition. Tool creation. Chen pointed to each area in turn. We became apex predators not through physical dominance, but through adaptation and cooperation. One of the sub-commanders clicked his mandibles dismissively. All species use tools. The Vexari developed spaceflight generations before humans crawled from their caves. True, Chen conceded, but there's a crucial difference. The hologram advanced to show increasingly sophisticated human weapons throughout history, spears giving way to bows, then firearms, then guided missiles. Your natural weapons, your blade arms, and armored exoskeletons have biological limits. They evolved with built-in restraints. Chen's voice remained clinical. Our artificial weapons had no such evolutionary constraints. The display shifted to historical footage from Earth's nuclear tests. The mushroom cloud expanded in terrible silence. Within a single human lifetime, we went from primitive flight to weapons that could devastate continents. Chen watched their reaction carefully. We discovered something terrifying about ourselves. Unchecked, our capacity for destruction far exceeded our wisdom. Krazoth leaned forward. Yet you claim humans aren't cowards. These images only prove you fear your own capabilities. Not fear, respect. Chen corrected. There's a difference between cowardice and restraint. The hologram changed again, displaying footage from the Mars Colony Rebellion, a conflict where autonomous defense systems had malfunctioned, resulting in civilian casualties. We learned costly lessons about delegating killing to machines, Chen explained. Each advancement required new ethical frameworks, not because we feared death, but because we understand something the Vexari haven't yet grasped. And what wisdom do humans possess that the Vexari Empire lacks? Krazoth's voice dripped with sarcasm. Chen deactivated the hologram, meeting his gaze directly. That true strength isn't measured by destruction capacity, but by what you choose not to destroy. An uncomfortable silence fell over the war chamber. One of the elder commanders leaned toward Krazoth, chittering softly in their native language. The general nodded. Your philosophy is interesting, but meaningless without demonstration, Krazoth declared. Words are wind. Power is real. I agree completely, Chen replied, reaching into her pocket to retrieve the metal sphere. Which is why I brought this. The Vexeri security team tensed, weapons half raised. This device was engineered specifically for Vexeri technology, Chen explained, holding the sphere up to catch the light. Would you like to see what one human can do with the right tool? Krasov's compound eyes narrowed, the equivalent of a human smile. By all means, demonstrate your restraint. Chen nodded once. As you wish, General. She activated the sphere. The sphere in Chen's palm hummed to life, its metallic surface developing a subtle iridescent sheen. A holographic interface materialized around it, displaying Vexeri script that scrolled too quickly for even their eyes to follow. What is it doing? Demanded the security chief, his claw hand hovering over his weapon. Chen remained motionless. Mapping your ship's neural network. Your vessel is partially organic, isn't it? A hybrid of technology and cultivated Vexeri biologics. Krasov's posture stiffened. That information was highly classified. The Hive Dominance has 57 critical systems. Chen continued, reading from the display only she could interpret. Life support, propulsion, weapons, communications, all controlled through a central neural hub that combines quantum computing with biological processing. An elegant solution. The sphere pulsed once, and the chamber's lights flickered. Impossible, whispered the science minister. Our systems are isolated. There can be no external intrusion without physical access to the neural core. Chen's smile never reached her eyes. We don't need physical access. Your ship scans everything that enters it, including my diplomatic credentials. When you scanned them, a quantum entanglement was established. On the galactic map overhead, red indicators began appearing across Vexeri systems, identifying vulnerabilities that had never been detected. You're bluffing, Krasov declared, though his voice lacked conviction. No species has technology sophisticated enough to breach our defenses remotely. Would you like proof? Chen asked softly. Without waiting for a response, she made a subtle gesture. Throughout the massive ship, lighting systems cycled in perfect sequence. Red, blue, green, a chromatic wave impossible to produce without deep access to environmental controls. The effect was instantaneous. Warriors reached for weapons. Commanders hissed commands. Security protocols activated throughout the chamber. That was just the lighting system, Chen explained calmly. Harmless, but visible. I could have chosen life support, or defense grids, or engine controls. As if to emphasize her point, the massive doors to the war chamber sealed and unsealed in rapid sequence. Security barriers raised and lowered. Even Krasov's personal communicator chimed with a message. From Chen herself, despite her standing right before him. One human, she said into the stunned silence. One small device. 3 minutes aboard your ship. The Vexeri commanders exchanged alarmed glances. Their entire military doctrine was based on overwhelming force and impenetrable defenses. If a single human could bypass those defenses so easily. You've made your point, Krasov conceded, mandibles clicking in barely controlled rage. Now state your purpose. What does Earth demand? Earth demands nothing, Chen replied, deactivating the sphere. I'm here to open a dialogue. A dialogue backed by threats, hissed the war minister. Not threats. Reality. Chen placed the sphere back in her pocket. If humans wanted to destroy the Vexeri, we wouldn't need fleets. We'd send infiltration teams, autonomous drones, engineered viruses targeted to your specific biology. She gestured toward the war trophies lining the walls. Those species you conquered, they fought conventionally. Army against army, ship against ship. They played by your rules and lost. And humans don't play by rules. Krasov's voice had acquired a dangerous edge. We play by different rules, Chen corrected. When the Vexeri go to war, you send thousands of warriors to overwhelm your enemy. Casualties are expected. Glorified, even. She took a step closer to the general. When humans go to war, we send precisely what's needed. Sometimes that's an army. Sometimes it's a virus. Sometimes, she gestured to herself, it's one soldier with the right tools and information. You claim this is courage, Krasov demanded, using trickery instead of facing us directly. A predator doesn't announce itself, Chen replied. It doesn't seek glorious battle. It eliminates threats efficiently. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Krasov's alien features. He studied Chen with new awareness, as one might suddenly recognize a venomous creature previously thought harmless. What do you want? He asked finally. A conversation, Chen replied, about the nature of courage and what it might mean for our species to coexist rather than collide. The war chamber fell silent as the general considered. Behind him, the galactic map continued to display the Vexari Empire's systems, now marked with countless vulnerability indicators that had never been visible before. Finally, Krasov made a gesture his commanders clearly hadn't expected. He dismissed his security detail. Speak then, human. I will listen. Krasov led Chen through a series of biosecure chambers to a private sanctum few non-Vexari had ever seen. The walls displayed battle honors spanning centuries, holographic recreations of conquests that had cemented the Empire's dominance. Unlike the war chamber's ostentatious displays, these were personal memories, moments that had shaped the general's rise to power. My ancestors fought with nothing but blade arms and courage, Krasov said, activating an ancient memory crystal. It projected the image of Vexari warriors charging across a battlefield against overwhelming odds. 10,000 fell that day so that 20,000 might secure victory. Chen studied the projection. You see glory in those deaths. They died with honor, facing their enemy, Krasov confirmed, not hiding behind machines. Let me show you something, General. Chen activated the final section of her presentation. Not military footage, but ordinary human lives captured in extraordinary moments. The first image showed a lone firefighter rushing into a burning high-rise, emerging minutes later with 2 children moments before the structure collapsed. This human faced certain death to save strangers, Chen explained. No orders, no glory, just duty. Another image appeared. A medical researcher who had deliberately infected herself with an experimental vaccine during the Proxima plague, risking death to prove it was safe for others. This scientist could have ordered subordinates to test her vaccine. Instead, she risked herself. Krasov's mandibles twitched in what Chen recognized as confusion. These are civilians, not warriors. Correct. More images followed. A diplomat walking unarmed into terrorist-held territory to negotiate hostage release, a rescue diver entering underwater caves during a collapse, a radiation specialist manually closing valves during a reactor breach, knowing the exposure would be fatal. I don't understand, the Vexari war minister clicked. These humans knowingly risk termination, for non-kin. For strangers, Chen confirmed, sometimes even for enemies. She showed footage that clearly startled the Vexari leadership, human medics treating wounded Vexari during the Proxima conflict, an event the Empire had previously interpreted as psychological warfare. This confused our intelligence analysts, Krasov admitted. We thought it was a trick. It wasn't. It was humanity demonstrating our highest principle, that sapient life has inherent value, regardless of species. Chen moved closer to the general, lowering her voice. You've dominated 17 species by making them fight by your rules. But humans don't separate warriors from civilians the way you do. In our darkest hours, kindergarten teachers have fought like special forces. Poets have become snipers. Farmers have sabotaged warships. She gestured to the memories of Vexari glory that surrounded them. Your culture produces excellent warriors, General. But human culture produces a species of warriors when necessary. Krasov studied her with new intensity. If what you say is true, why haven't humans eradicated us? Your technology clearly could. Without warning, Chen activated a final hologram. detailed schematics of the Vexari homeworld, showing its vulnerable subterranean aquifers and atmospheric regulation systems. Krazoth hissed in alarm. How did you? 3 years ago, a single human infiltrator accessed these plans. Chen explained calmly. We could have poisoned your world's water supply, introduced tailored pathogens into your atmosphere processors, ended the Vexari threat permanently. Then why didn't you? Krazoth demanded, genuine bewilderment in his voice. Because courage isn't just knowing when to fight, Chen replied. It's knowing when not to. Genocide isn't victory, it's failure of imagination. She deactivated the hologram. I came here alone, not because Earth couldn't send an army, but because walking unarmed into this chamber, trusting you'd listen rather than kill me instantly, was the braver choice. The war minister approached. Why would your leaders risk their best operative this way? Chen's expression softened slightly. They didn't order me to come. I volunteered. A ripple of astonishment passed through the Vexari leadership. You chose potential death. Krazoth's translator struggled with the concept. To prevent certain death for millions, yes. Chen held his gaze steadily. That's what humans do. For the first time since her arrival, Krazoth lowered himself to her eye level. A gesture of respect, the other commanders observed with visible shock. I begin to understand, he said quietly, why 17 of our incursions against human colonies have failed despite superior numbers. In the silence that followed, a different kind of tension filled the chamber, not the prelude to violence, but the uncomfortable recognition of a paradigm shifting irreversibly. The sanctum's lighting dimmed as Krazoth activated an ancient ceremonial protocol. The remaining commanders arranged themselves in a formation Chen recognized from xenocultural briefings. The Circle of Grave Matters, convened only when fundamental imperial doctrines were being reconsidered. In 5,000 cycles, Krazoth began, his voice taking on a formal cadence. No species has caused the Empire to question its path. Yet here we stand, unsettled by the words of one human. The war minister's exoskeleton flashed patterns of agitation. General, this could be elaborate deception. Humans are known for psychological warfare. Perhaps, Krazoth acknowledged. But their actions align with their words. They have penetrated our defenses repeatedly yet launched no invasion. They have identified our vulnerabilities yet exploited none. This suggests restraint, not weakness. He gestured to the galactic map where a new threat glowed at the outer boundaries, a massive force moving inexorably toward both human and Vexari space. The Arcturus hive approaches, he said gravely. Neither of our civilizations can withstand them alone. Chen studied the visualization with growing concern. The hive was a quasi-sentient, rapidly expanding collection of biomechanical entities that consumed all in their path. A genuine existential threat to all oxygen-breathing species. You knew about this, she asked. We've tracked their expansion for 3 cycles, the science minister confirmed. At current velocities, they will reach Vexari colony worlds within 70 rotations, human settlements shortly after. Why didn't you warn Earth? Krazoth's mandibles clicked in what Chen now recognized as discomfort. Warning potential rivals is not traditional Vexari practice. And how has tradition served you? Chen asked quietly. Your empire expands through conquest, but at what cost? Constant warfare, resource depletion, perpetual military readiness with no end goal beyond the next subjugation. The ancient commander who had remained silent until now stepped forward. His exoskeleton bore the marks of battles, so old that even Krazoth showed deference. I fought in the early expansions, the elder said, his translator rendering his clicks and hisses into a raspy voice. We believed domination was the only path to security. But after 17 conquered species and thousands of worlds, we face extinction from a threat no single civilization can overcome. He turned to Chen. Your methods disturb us, human. You fight without honor by our standards. Yet you preserve life where we would sacrifice it. You cooperate where we would compete. And now, He gestured to the approaching hive. Your approach may be our only salvation. Krazoth moved to stand beside Chen, his massive form no longer looming over her but positioned as an equal. I still don't fully understand. If humans possess such devastating capabilities, such technological advantages, why not simply eliminate all threats? Why seek conversation when conquest is possible? Chen walked to the viewport where stars glittered coldly against the void. Because the universe is vast and harbors dangers neither of us can imagine. The Vexeri have survived through overwhelming force. Humanity has survived through adaptation and cooperation. She turned to face him. You called us cowards for refusing open battle, but any species can fight. Choosing peace when war seems easier requires true strength. Finding solutions that preserve lives rather than expend them is the real challenge. To everyone's shock, Krazoth lowered himself into the formal genuflection posture, one never before offered to a non-Vexeri. The other commanders followed, even the ancient elder. When you entered my ship alone, he admitted, I thought you mad or desperate. Now I understand it was neither. He rose and made a gesture his commanders recognized with visible shock. The sacred four-claw salute reserved only for equals who had proven their valor beyond question. The humans have consistently defeated our incursions with smaller forces, Krazoth told his stunned subordinates. Now I understand how. We don't need superior numbers, Chen replied softly. We just need sufficient motivation. And what motivates humans now, Commander Chen? Krazoth asked, using her rank for the first time. She smiled slightly. The same thing that should motivate the Vexeri, survival. Not just of individuals, but of everything we've built, everything we could become together. As the hive's projection loomed larger on the display, the war chamber fell silent, not in strategic calculation or rage, but in contemplation of a fundamental shift in the galaxy's balance of power. 3 months later, the Grand Conclave Chamber on neutral Epsilon Station hummed with nervous energy. Representatives from 22 species gathered beneath its transparent dome, watching the unprecedented sight of human and Vexeri delegations entering together. Staff Sergeant, now Commander, Maya Chen walked alongside General Krazoth. Her simple black uniform contrasted sharply with his ceremonial armor, which now bore a new symbol, a human handprint overlaid on the Vexeri imperial crest. The 17 previously subjugated species ambassadors shifted uneasily. For generations, they had known the Vexeri only as conquerors. This apparent alliance seemed impossible. By imperial decree, the assembled are recognized as sovereign entities, Krazoth announced, triggering a wave of shocked murmurs. No Vexeri leader had ever acknowledged other species as equals. The massive holographic display at the chamber's center activated, showing the advancing Arcturus hive, a seething mass of biomechanical entities that had already consumed 3 star systems. We gather at the edge of extinction, Krazoth's voice boomed. The hive approaches, devouring all in its path. They cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be intimidated. They consume and adapt. Chen stepped forward. For millennia, our civilizations have fought one another, competing for resources and territory. Meanwhile, this threat has grown unchecked, because none of us were willing to share intelligence or cooperate. She gestured to the assembled delegates. Each of our species brings unique strengths. The Vexeri's military infrastructure and warrior culture, humanity's adaptability and technological innovation, the Alteri's biomimetic engineering, the Zenith's psychospatial navigation. Krazoth's mandibles clicked in solemn agreement. For generations, the Vexeri have believed strength comes from conquest, that courage is measured in enemies defeated, planets subjugated, warriors sacrificed. He turned to Chen, making the formal gesture of respect that sent ripples of astonishment through the chamber. We were wrong. Never in recorded history had a Vexeri general admitted error publicly. Humanity taught us the hardest lesson an empire can learn, Krazoth declared. True strength comes not from domination, but cooperation. Not from how many warriors you sacrifice, but what you're willing to sacrifice for others. Chen activated the next display, a comprehensive defense plan combining technologies and strategies from multiple species. This proposal represents something unprecedented, a coalition of equals, each contributing according to their strengths. The treaty terms appeared, shocking the delegates with their generosity. Humanity would share medical, agricultural, and environmental technologies with all signatory species. The Vexeri would transform their vast military infrastructure into a defensive shield protecting all allied worlds. Most surprising of all, the formerly subjugated species were offered something they never expected: choice. They could remain under Vexeri protection, align with humanity, or establish independence with security guarantees from both powers. As the delegates reviewed the terms, a Zenith diplomat approached Chen. "How did you accomplish this?" "The Vexeri have never negotiated." Chen smiled slightly. "Sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemy, but transforming them into an ally." Across the chamber, a wizened Alteri elder who had survived 3 Vexeri invasions studied the human with gleaming compound eyes. "One soldier," she whispered to her aide. They sent one soldier, and that changed everything. As the signing ceremony commenced, Chen stood aside, watching as former enemies became tentative allies. Admiral Raya's voice echoed in her memory. "They expect an army. Instead, they'll get one human." Krazoth found her at the viewport, where the first joint Vexeri human fleet was assembling against the distant stars. "The Hada will reach our territories within 60 rotations," he said gravely. "Even together, victory is uncertain." "That's why we start working together now," Chen replied. The general made a sound Chen now recognized as contemplative laughter. "One soldier," he said, mandibles clicking gently. "Your people sent one soldier to face an empire, and that soldier changed everything." Chen smiled. "Sometimes that's all it takes, one individual willing to stand their ground and speak truth to power." "A very human concept," Krazoth acknowledged, "but perhaps exactly what the galaxy needs now." As they watched, ships from formerly hostile worlds moved into defensive formation, the first united armada in galactic history, forged not through conquest, but conversation. At its heart stood the unlikeliest of symbols, the understanding that true strength isn't measured by enemies destroyed, but by alliances formed, not by worlds conquered, but by civilizations preserved. And it had begun with one human soldier, walking unarmed into the heart of an enemy stronghold, carrying not weapons but ideas. Ideas that proved more powerful than any fleet, more transformative than any conquest, and more enduring than any empire.